What's good, everybody? Welcome into our Passion Project, week number 2 of 90-Day Our Way with the coach and the kid, Cody Merrow. And I got to tell you, after week 1, I could not be more excited. But Cody, I got to say, I was left with a dilemma this week because there's 3 different shows, brand new, that have started in the 90-Day Fiance franchise. And I was like, do we focus on one or do we do all 3? And then I thought, let's make it a little competition. So whoever has the best storylines and the best different things to go in our segments, that's what makes it into the show. Are you cool with that?
I love it. I think the one thing that we don't have a question on is that fans love the show. The response last week on social media was great, and we can't wait to bring you episode 2.
All right, so here we go. So it is now time, because we have so much to get to in a very, very limited amount of time. It's now time for the main event. Now, the first couple, and Cody, this is part of the reason why I wanted to start this show. Because, yeah, we joke a lot about the different craziness that goes on in this franchise, but there's also a lot of substance. And there's a lot of relationships that we can learn things out of, and I think we can become better people. So I want to start with Kenny and Armando. Now, Kenny is 57 years old. He looks literally like he's 27 years old. It's crazy. Armando is 31. And they look the same age when you see their pictures. But here's where the story really saddened me. As I watched the first episode last week and then the second one this week, they're from the other way, 90 Day the Other Way. And they're obviously a gay couple. And they're moving to Mexico because Armando can't move to the United States. He's got an 8-year-old daughter. But here's the backstory that really breaks my heart. He got married to a female because he wanted to, in his words, try to become a man again. He didn't want to be gay, instead of embracing who he was as a person. So he was married, they had an 8-year-old daughter. He finally told his wife, listen, I've got to live my truth. And his truth is being a gay man. And his wife embraced it. At first didn't like it very well, but then she became his best friend. And then tragically, she died in a car accident just 3 months after they decided to part ways. And he met Kenny on a website for a support site for gay fathers, because Kenny is a father of 4. And when I started watching his story, I was like, wow, father of 4. And he was kind of the same way, that he grew up, wanted to not be the gay man. And one night he went to a gay club and he says, I'm home. This is where I was meant to be. And he embraced his lifestyle from early on in his 20s. He has 4 kids. He had a woman in his life agreed to have a child for him twice. They had a son, then they had triplet daughters. So he's got 4 kids that for the last, 27 years, they have been his life. And now he's going to move to Mexico to be with Armando. But Cody, I want your reaction to this, because they're going to a place in Mexico that really doesn't embrace gay couples, doesn't embrace that lifestyle. And I'm really worried for what they're getting ready to face the rest of the season. This isn't a storyline. This is their real life.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, and that is, does love truly conquer all? I think culturally, you're always going to deal with oddities and things that don't match America. We're in a very unique situation here in America where it's a blending pot of cultures and acceptance where you're not going to find that in other places. So I do share the sentiment with you that there is a bit of fear and anxiety that goes along with that as a viewer, because you are fearful for the health and safety of these people, because at the end of the day, when the cameras stop rolling, their lives continue, and the show doesn't stop just because the cameras are off. So I do share that sentiment, and I think it kind of goes to show just how far these people will go to find love, to find what is next for this stage of their life. And, does love truly conquer all?
That's a great point, because Kenny was at kind of the final dinner, final supper with the rest of his family, and he was breaking down. He was very emotional, because he understands that he's moving away from all the family that he's ever known. And one of his daughters has a grandson that he's his world. And now he's going to move away from his grandson. And he understands that there's going to be issues. He understands that there's going to be danger. But he also understands that his triplet daughters and his son, they need him. But there was kind of a funny part in the dinner when his daughter-in-law, or his son's girlfriend, was asking how old Armando was. He goes, well, he's 31. She goes, oh, we're the same age. So Kenny and his son are dating people the exact same age, which I thought that was very funny. I just hope when I'm 57, A, that I look as good as Kenny, and B, that I can get a 31-year-old by then, if I'm not married by then. You know what I mean? He is an anomaly. And this is going to be a relationship that we're going to keep an eye on over the course of the next couple of months, because I'm rooting for them. I want them to win. And I also want Armando's family to embrace him, because they haven't talked about it since his late wife told his mother. She didn't even allow him to tell his mother. She brought it up. And that infuriated him at the time. But now he just wants them to embrace him, his daughter, his gay lifestyle, and just love him. And that's what we all want. And people who watch this show, we get invested in these people. And I'm invested big time in these two. Now, our next couple that also makes it into our main event, these two make me smile. They make me laugh. And it's crazy. This is the crazy part of the main event. So Jenny and Sumit, my tribute to Forrest Gump. Jenny is 61 years old. Sumit is half her age. And he's from India. This thing's a mess. An absolute mess. So the first time she goes over, she had met Sumit. He lied to her, had pictures of somebody else on the website. And when he finally showed her who he was, she was already in love with him. And she was like, there was nothing I could do. I loved him. And so they're trying to date. And she finds out when he gets over there that he was married, an arranged marriage. And he was trying to get out of it, and that everybody in his life was not down for it. So he was hiding her. And they had to sneak around. And finally one day, and can you imagine this happening to you? What if your girlfriend's parents showed up at your front door and she was married to somebody else and dragged her out of your house? That's what happened to Jenny and Sumit. How terrifying would that be for you, being a different country, different culture, and now you're stuck all by yourself?
Well, I think it's mortifying for two reasons. One, because that's happening to you in a foreign place. You don't know what's going on. And two, imagine the inner catharsis that goes on, thinking that you thought what you were being told was the truth, and then all in one foul swoop of you getting pushed out of the house, that is absolutely not true. So there's two things going on there that I think are a bit problematic, especially being almost like cold water thrown on your face in that moment.
Now, here's where I really have a big issue, and I've got to come down on Jenny with this, because there's so many of these characters and cast members, whatever you want to call them, that run into the same issue, and they say the same things. And us normal people who have normal minds, we go, wait a second, what are you doing? So Jenny goes to her financial advisor and says, I have $6,000 to my name. How long do you think that'll last? He says, well, maybe 3 or 4 months. And she's, oh. How long do these people think $6,000 is going to last them? Like they just go and they worry about the money part afterwards. So she said, quote, and I wrote it down, I'm forced to do what I want to do, but not what I should do. But hey, this is my only option. Guess what, Jenny? It's not your only option. There's a lot of different things that you could do. You could keep your job at the amusement park where you had a 401k and you wouldn't have to crack into it. But she's already done all of that. And apparently Sumit has told her, because of the $20,000 that he has to pay to his soon-to-be ex-wife's family, that she's going to have to support them for a while. So she's cashing in her Social Security, losing 30% because she's only 61 instead of 65. And she's going to live on $600 a month. How far would that get you?
Tomorrow?
Exactly
Simpatico,
right.
episode 2. On the same page.
This is crazy. So they're also in the 90 Day Fiance Other Way show. So our main event this week are 2 Other Way couples. And now on next week's episode, Jenny arrives in India, and she claims that if he doesn't have the divorce papers, or basically say that the divorce is over, that it's the last straw, that she's out of there, that there's nothing she can do. And I just don't think that's true. I don't think Jenny, no matter what, is going anywhere. But we're going to find out very soon, because she's headed to India, even though her 2 daughters, they're not about it. But they're supporting her to a certain extent. But right now, to me, Jenny, Submit, Kenny, and Armando, those are the two couples right now that, to me, they absolutely belong in our main event. Okay, the main event is in the books. It's time for a brand new segment, kids, and I like to call Grow Up, because there's a lot of these characters on these shows that, to me, they absolutely have to grow up and step up. And right now, there is nobody that has to do that more than my man Jihoon, who is married to Devin. And I don't know who I'm more surprised by, disappointed in, but Devin seems like a very smart girl. She had a kid from a previous marriage. She meets Jihoon on social media like they all do, or some form of dating site. He flies to America. The very first night he's there, they have sex, and she gets pregnant. And so now she's having this very adorable South Korean baby. And so over the course of the last couple of years, she's gone to South Korea 2 different times. She got married one of the times, and then she went back. And when you talk to Jihoon or you hear him talk, his English is obviously broken, but it's like talking to a 14-year-old. She's dealing with 3 kids, her 2 and her husband. And his parents are like those parents that have a kid who's a classic screw-up. They're like, hey, he's your problem now. He's not ours. We find out he's got a criminal record because he was selling some used phones illegally, whatever that was. But the bottom line is he's never had a job. He doesn't make any money. And so on the show last night, they're also on the other way, basically he lies to her on FaceTime because she now has decided she's going to come back one more time. He's told her, I have a job. I'm making money. So she says, okay, you have a new job. How much are you making? He says, 3,000 to 4,000. She goes, you don't know how much you're making? He goes, no, I don't know. He goes, how do you have a job and not know how much you're making? And she goes, well, we're going to need more than that. He goes, oh, I have another job. She goes, well, how much are you making from that? He goes, well, total like 6,000 or 7,000. And then you fast forward in the episode, and he's talking to his friends, and he goes, I've got a big problem. I don't have any job. He literally lied to her face. She's on a jet, and she had already gotten the apartment for them. She's like, I'm not living with your parents anymore. So she's got an apartment for a month, and she tells him, you better be ready to step up like the man that you need to be. He loves his son, but I'm afraid that how this story ends is going to be with Devin going right back here to the United States because Jihoon is an overgrown child. He's 29 years old, but don't you agree he sounds like maybe a 13 or 14-year-old at best?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, not to be breaking the fourth wall too much, but I'm only 27, and I feel I'm light years ahead of 29-year-old Jihoon. And it brings up something very interesting. So this is obviously a 90-day the other way. So the American is going outside of the country. Now imagine how terrible it would be for Jihoon if he was trying to come to America. He has obviously the language barrier. He seems to be a little slow mentally, to put it lightly. How would that transition work that way? Because I think it would be even more disastrous if he were to come to America with all of the immaturity issues and the lack of just understanding of just how to support his family.
See, that's the nail on the head that you just hit, because the frustration to me for Devin would be even worse if that was the case, because you have to get either a green card or a work visa in order to even have a job here. So how long do you think it would take Jihoon to fill out that paperwork and to do that process? So you're talking, 6 months or a year of him sitting at home, unable to work unless he finds something he can make cash under the table. But he doesn't seem that motivated to me.
No.
And she would be out there working and then coming home, taking care of the baby, the toddler, and him. Absolute disaster. It would be an absolute disaster. And to me, he has to grow up. But I don't know if he's capable of growing up. Do you?
I don't think so. He hasn't proven to us that he's even capable of understanding what that means. So if I was going to have to choose right today, Cody, is Jihoon going to last through this relationship because he can't grow up? I think no, he doesn't last through this relationship.
Devin, we're all shaking our heads. We don't know how you got in this predicament. You seem like a very pretty, nice young girl. But we also agree, Jihoon, you have got to grow up. All right. Now, couple number 2 in the grow up segment. And this is Asuela. He's from Samoa. He's married to Kalani. And this is another thing that when these couples that have no money and they're trying to go back and forth, when they have one kid, okay, I can see you make a mistake. But they have multiple kids. They have like 2, sometimes 3, and then they wonder, well, I can't afford it. Well, don't have multiple kids when you're trying to just make ends meet. And so he meets a bunch of Samoan friends. He's playing volleyball in this episode of The Other Way. And then they stop to do that very staged discussion that happens in every episode. And he talks about how much he's missing his family. He wants to go back. But apparently in the Samoan culture, Cody, you have to take money when you go back because you're considered to be somebody that got out and that you should be making money in America because it's the greatest country in the world. He has a part-time job, probably making an hourly wage. And he says, I don't have the money to go back and present to them. How sad would it be that if you missed your family, another culture, you're living in another country, that you can't go back because your family wouldn't accept you if you don't take any money to them? I find that sad.
Well, it's terrible. I mean, it's essentially putting a value on how much you mean to those people. So I think that'd be really tough, and especially when you're dealing with a lot of insecurity and just not knowing within your own mind, like, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? And then added on top of that, you can't have the support of your family because you don't have this money. Like, there's a lot of factors there internally that I think make it incredibly difficult, adding on top of all these other circumstances.
There is such a fine line in the United States right now because if you say wrong things about a certain group of people, that can just blow up in your face, especially if you're public figures like you and I are. But when I think about when you're critical of females in relationships, that's also a very dicey fence to ride on. But some of these women that are creating these relationships with these men from a foreign country, I just want to just knock them upside the head and say, what were you thinking? You brought a 24-year-old Samoan man to the United States that barely knows the language. How much do you really expect him to be able to make? What kind of job can this man have and make more than $25,000 a year? There's very few jobs like that for him, but yet their frustration is always on the guy for not stepping up and doing more. But you brought him here. So to me, it's as much on the female or the American as it is on the foreigner.
Right. There's some type of expectation level that obviously does not exist there or needs to alter, because I agree with you. I mean, I'm a young enough man who's lived in New York City to think if you walk outside, there's hundreds of suitors. Why are you having to go outside of the country to find somebody that matches this profile that you've built up or expectation of a man that the Americans can't come to? It's a very dicey situation. I think you kind of get into the weeds of psychology there when you're trying to think about what type of mentality does the person that gets into this situation have to already come in with. And I think you laid out a good point as far as sometimes in, modern Western relationships, you just have to shut up. Sometimes the worst thing you can say is anything. So I think that's a bit of cultural difference there that you see a lot of the difficulty when we're having these scenarios of The Other Way and 90 Day, and something that specifically in this situation, the expectation was just totally off.
I can't say it any better. So I will just say, Asuela, you, sir, have got to grow up. All right, we've reached the time of the show. We have another brand new segment. We like to call it One Word. Cody, you ready? Let's get to it.
Well, let's jump right into it with ARIELA. She's engaged with a man from Ethiopia and wants to have her baby in that country. Coach, one word.
This whole situation to me is very, very conniving because we're talking about a man, and they buried the lead until episode number 2 last night, by the way. Binyam is her fiance, spelled Binyam. He already has one American ex-wife. That wife has their son, and she got upset. It was a bad divorce, and she up and moves back to the United States. Any father, and I can only imagine if my ex-wife took my kids to another country, I would lose my mind. So I think that he is very, very conniving, and it's very possible that he is trying to use ARIELA to get back to the United States and to be around his son. Now, that to me is one part of it. The other part is, how has he convinced her or manipulated her to believe that it's safer for her to have the baby in Ethiopia at the hospitals there as opposed to the incredible hospitals we have here in the United States. In fact, week one, last week, she met with her doctor. He thought she was just going over there for a trip and was going to come back and have the baby. She breaks it to him that her mother's going to make sure everything is okay, but she plans on staying there. And so in this week's episode, she's sitting at the dinner table and everybody is coming at her. And they're like, are you going to go there forever? And her dad actually says, you couldn't have met a nice Jewish boy from Staten Island instead of Ethiopia? And I'm like, damn, Dad, you really, shots fired. And she looks at him and says, in her confessional, of course, why can't my family be supportive of this? And I wanted to scream at the TV, because you're having a baby in Ethiopia. Nobody in their right mind would ever in a million years want to do that. But she's doing it, and she's convinced the father has to be in the delivery room. And I appreciate that because she's thinking of the man. But in this situation, there is no way on God's green earth that I would go have a baby in Ethiopia and then stay and live there. There's no way. So she better come back here to the States, because if not, she's going to do it eventually, just like the first ex-wife did, and she'll be the second ex-wife, in my opinion. My one word, conniving. Next.
So another couple that I want to get a word from you on, ANDREI and Elizabeth, already married, but at a family gathering, ANDREI sprung it upon them that he wants to have a formal wedding in Moldova in 5 weeks. Coach, one word.
My one word is bully. He's very much being a bully in this situation because her family's not happy. She has these two sisters. And by the way, they had one of the most awkward, socially acceptable, however, scenes that I've ever seen. After he says, we're going to have a wedding in 5 weeks, and I expect everybody to be there. They had a lot of concerns. They're like, first of all, we all have children. We have newborns. We have toddlers. Why would I take our kids and our families to one of the most dangerous countries in the world? And of course, Elizabeth's like, it's not dangerous. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Of course, when you're in love and your husband's from there, you're not going to think it's dangerous. But when you're coming in to visit, it's very dangerous. And when you're taking your kids there on purpose, it's very dangerous. I don't think that her family's out of bounds here. I think ANDREI's out of bounds. And then on top of that, when he says it's tradition for the woman's father to pay for the wedding in Moldova, she says, so you want me to ask my father to pay for this wedding, even though it's 5 weeks from now and none of my family can probably come? He's like, absolutely. And he doubles down on it after the three sisters get together and breastfeed on camera. On camera. I don't think I've ever seen three women breastfeed on camera with everything out. But again, very socially acceptable. I didn't have an issue with that. It was just the fact that they're having this conversation with these babies on, on their breasts the entire time. I thought that was kind of funny. But basically her sisters are like, listen, enough's enough. We supported you in being with this man, but there is no way in hell we're going to Moldova for a wedding. So for me, ANDREI, he's been a bully. Next up,
BRITTANY. Someone who we both agree has such a free spirit, and she's with somebody from Jordan, but she has a big secret. Coach, one word.
My one word for this is misinformed. BRITTANY, a free spirit would be polite. She loves to wear sexy clothing. When she met Yazan, her fiance from Jordan, she was wearing short skirts in Jordan. And he even says in his confessionals, she's going to be in for a rude awakening when she comes here to live. And she plans to come there and live permanently, which to me, I just can't even wrap my head around, even though I've been watching the show for a long time, moving to a country where the only people that make any money of any substantial amount are royalty or people that are in the mob in these countries. But there's no chance of these people making a really, really good living. So BRITTANY's going there. We've seen she likes to rap. She likes to do videos. She can't be that way in Jordan. And he's made it very clear. There will be no short skirts. There will be no low-cut tops. She'll be wearing the traditional garb that women here in Jordan wear. She's not down with that. She's not down to change to his religion. And he's like, yes, she will. But when I say misinformed, BRITTANY is still married. That's what you were alluding to. she's not divorced yet she got married when she's like 18 or 19 years old. So she meets with a lawyer, and the lawyer is basically like, listen, you could have some issues if you go to Jordan, because in Jordan, that's basically bigamy if you try to marry another person. Right. And there have been people killed for that.
Stoned.
Killed for that. Right? So she's scared to death, and I would be too, to tell him after she gets there. Again, scratching my head, why would you not tell him before? Why would you get on a plane and tell him in person? All these things about telling people in person, I've never understood. FaceTime's good with me. I don't need to tell you in person, because if you're hot, if you get pissed, I'm not there. And I don't have to go there, and we can go our separate ways. That's not going to be the case when she gets on the airplane and travels over there and tells him in person. The other part of my one word, the misinformed, it's from his side. And I wrote this quote down to make sure I had it right. I should have met a relative. Talking about dating. I should have met a relative. I mean, my parents are related. So apparently in Jordan, relatives not only date, they marry each other. And I was a little shocked by that. And I know every culture is different, but certainly in America, relatives don't date, they don't marry, and they don't have, at least most don't. But that to me was wow. So he's got to tell her, she's got to tell him. The odds of this relationship working out, because they are misinformed, very, very little. That's my one word. Next.
My response to you, Coach, is 4 words. What are you thinking? And moving on through to another man that I can't figure out what he's thinking either. It's Colt. He's divorced from one Brazilian woman and is now with another on the TV show. Coach, 1 word.
My one word for Colt is jackpot. Jackpot. Because Colt's figured it out that if you want to have spice in your relationship, if you want to have some color, if you want to have some excitement, and most importantly, if you want to have some good old-fashioned sex, then Brazil is the way to go. Now, his first ex-wife is also still on the show, and she's starting her new life in the United States. So he's dating this new girl named Jess, and they're on one of these water taxis in Chicago. And he looks at her and basically says, why do you like me? Why do you think we're good together? And she says in her Brazilian accent, quote, I like sex. You like sex. It's a perfect match. I laughed like crazy. If all relationships were just based on liking sex, there would be no divorce. Everybody would be happy, because nobody's ever complained, I've had too much sex this week. I've never heard anybody say that. So, and I'll be honest, both of these girls, we talk about why do these guys go outside the United States? There's a certain level that a guy like Colt is going to get in the United States, right? There's somebody for everybody. He would not be getting these kinds of women in the United States. But these Brazilian women who want to come here and live, and it's a great place to live, they're willing to overlook certain flaws, so to speak. He's never had a good job. He's never made a lot of money. And his ex-wife was arrested not once, not twice, 3 times for domestic violence. And basically he just said, I'm done with you and I'm going to move on. But it certainly caused him to be very, very bitter towards women and untrustworthy, untrusting of women. And I get that. But for right now, if I'm Colt, just literally ride it out until it gets old to you. And then you'll be good. You can move on to the next one because he has a type. But my one word for Colt getting all of this sex, jackpot, and that has been a one word. All right, we've come to the part of the show where we bring in our favorite characters, our favorite castmates who may have just shown up on one of the shows this week. And Cody, we love Easy Ed from the Tell-Alls and him and Rose. And there was a 1-hour special this week, the Tell-All, the cast tells more. And to me, it was as good of an hour as the actual Tell-All was. because
Okay.
in the VIP room this week, we've got our boy Easy Ed from San Diego, and we've got David of David and Lana fame. And these two absolutely go at it on the show. And it was hilarious to me, and I'm anxious to get your feedback as well, that Ed just started blasting David for being a moron, for paying money, even though David's like, I'm wealthy. Paying $100,000 to these Ukrainian dating sites is nothing for me. But then they get into the Zubik zirconium ring that David bought for Lana when he asked her to marry him. And then Ed starts crushing him. And then Shauna asked David, how many times have you been engaged? And my mouth was on the floor when David has to look into the air and he goes, four times. And we're like, 4 times? And he's like, yes, to 2 American women and to 2 Ukrainian women. And I was a little confused if Lana was one of those or if this was the 5th engagement. Regardless, he claims he didn't know Lana's ring size and that he wasn't going to invest in a really expensive ring so Lana could pick out her own ring. He still lives this delusional world that Lana's going to marry him. She's going to move to the United States. And Ed calls him props. He's like, the ring's a prop. The website's a prop. Everything's a prop. When David gets defensive, it's like watching a 7-year-old child stomp his feet on the ground and he doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear that he's being taken advantage of. He doesn't want to hear that Lana's not real and that the relationship isn't real. And I just find that these two entertain me more than anybody else on any of the franchises, and I want them to stay. I don't want them to go anywhere.
Well, I'll tell you, the reason that Ed is sitting here in our VIP room right now is because there's no way that he didn't come on to those shows being like, I'm going to win. After this show comes out, I'm going to go on social media and I'm going to be the one that won. People are going to talk about Ed and how Ed beat David, how Ed is the star. And that's exactly what he did. He went in there with a plan, he executed, and that's why Ed is sitting here in the VIP room right now.
Now, the thing I like about Ed, too, is not only is he very funny, he also has a very self-deprecating sense of humor. And
Right.
he explained that in the show. He was like, listen, I grew up. I've always looked kind of different. He has some type of disease that he doesn't have enough bones in his neck. That's why he really has no neck. And he said growing up, he was always teased. He was called names like No Neck, and I can't remember some of the other names. It's very, very mean. And I find him comical. I find him funny. I know I can be friends with him. We're really going to try and get him here on the show. I think he'd be great on the show. But Stephanie, who was dating Erica from Australia, she jumps in and she's like, wait a second. She defended David. She's like, David was willing to spend $100,000. And Ed, on the show, you were worried about spending $2 on Rose. And Ed laughed and goes, you got me. You got me. You got me. And that's what I appreciate about Ed. He can go after somebody, but he can still laugh at himself.
Well, we love him. That's why he's sitting here in the VIP room. And I would venture to say that Ed is going to be a long-standing staple here in the VIP room. We might have to get him a table or some featured bottle service or something because he might be here for a long time.
We are not letting Ed go anywhere because for 90-Day fans that are listening right now, as we wrap this show up, next week, the 90-Day Fiance franchise is starting yet another new show. And it's called B90 Strikes Back. And I can't wait for this. It's when fans of the show write in to their favorite people or people they want to make fun of or whatever, and the cast members read the tweets or the emails or whatever, and they get to strike back at the viewer. And Ed is all over the promos. He's all over the commercials. And I can't wait to see what people say to him, but more importantly, what he says to the fans. This could arguably be my favorite new franchise within the franchise. Are you looking forward to it?
Well, I can't wait. I mean, I think they're just missing a huge opportunity. Just make it a show for Ed. Why not?
I could watch Ed for 60 minutes yell back at people. I could watch Ed and David yell at each other for 60 minutes. I think that would be very, very entertaining. I absolutely do. But I never thought that we'd have so many shows to choose from. And it's almost like the people from 90 Day Fiance. And we are quickly trying to become the standard, the official podcast of the show. And we'll get there. We'll get there. It just takes some time. But the fact that they're willing to launch all these different shows all at the same time tells me, A, there's a lot of synergy between some of the characters that have been on these different ones, but also they've had to move some of their programming up because of the pandemic. And that's good for all of us 90 Day fans. But it's going to be up to you and I, Cody, to decipher, to dissect, and to make sure everybody at home understands all the different shows and where the people are at. And I think we're up to the challenge. I really, really do.
Well, I can't help but agree. But while we are going to try and do this our own, we want you guys to help. Make sure you're commenting below in the comments. Make sure you're hitting up Coach on Instagram and Twitter. Tell us what you guys want to see. We really want to be that fan-first podcast for the 90-Day community, and we can't wait to be continuing to bring you new episodes as they keep rolling out great content.
That's exactly right. Audio all over where you find your podcast, and video on YouTube every single week. It's the 90-Day Our Way podcast. That's going to do it for us now. Coming up next week, the big question is this, Cody. Will Submit show the divorce papers to Jenny where they can really start to live their lives with nobody else involved in India? Think about that. We'll tackle that next week. Thanks so much for joining us on episode 2 of 90 Day Our Way. For Cody the Kid, I'm the Coach. Have a great week. See you.